Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well-known California psychologist Dr. Robert Emmons, who studies the psychology of gratitude, said that, and I quote, "Gratitude is the truest approach to life. We did not create or fashion ourselves. We did not birth ourselves. Life is about giving, receiving, and repaying. We are receptive beings dependent upon the help of others and on their gifts and their kindness." Welcome to this special Christmas holiday version of our dialogue. It is not all about business or public policy per se. In fact, in the immortal classic A Christmas Carol, the ghost of Jacob Marley exclaims, "Mankind should have been my business." That in part is why we chose to discuss gratitude. According to Wikipedia, gratitude is a feeling or attitude in acknowledgement of a benefit that one has received or will receive. Almost universal to all religions, gratitude is viewed as a premiumly prized human predisposition. Stay with us, please.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Kirsten Sikkelee, CEO, YWCA Central Carolinas. John Cleghorn, Senior Minister at Caldwell Presbyterian Church. Douglas Ottati, Craig Family Distinguished Professor of Reformed Theology and Justice, Davidson College. And Rebecca Woodman, Director of Care and Counseling, Forest Hill Church.
Hello, welcome to our program. So it's hard to not be engaged in this idea of gratitude. First of all, let me just say, and I know this is not necessarily PC, but Merry Christmas to you all. Happy holidays and
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Same to you.
Glad to have you on the program.
Thank you.
So gratitude, it is a softer science to say the least. Rebecca, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
What is it about gratitude? You know, we're not going to talk about business. We're not going to talk about policy. Why is gratitude important? And is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that gratitude really changes your entire perspective. It's understanding that what you have received, whether it's in your relationships, whether it's in your workplace, in whatever aspect of life, what you have received, someone has given to you, and that you didn't earn it. And what I would say too is that gratitude changes our entire perspective. It can really become a lifestyle, a habit. And we have the choice every single day. Gratitude really is a choice. We have the choice. Do we get up and do we say, oh, poor me, I've got another struggle, I've got another hardship? Or do I say, you know what, I can find something today to be thankful for? And it opens your eyes to really the breadth and depth of all that life can be.
Anybody have a different take on that?
I just love what Rebecca said, because I think gratitude is processional. It's something that you choose every day. It's an attitude choice. It makes me think of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, where when he was in a concentration camp, he had nothing left at all, and all his choice was about attitude. And it is gratitude is that attitude.
Anyone?
I think it's an orientation. You use the word perspective, Rebecca, and I think that's an excellent one. But if it's our orientation to life, even in the hard times, we know that there is more, and we know that there is a promise, and we know that there is a hope. And if that is our orientation every day, we get through the day, whether it's a good day or a bad day. I'm reminded of what the great theologian Charles Schulz said in a Peanuts cartoon. He pictured Charlie Brown and Snoopy sitting at the end of a dock, and they were looking out at the sunset, and Charlie Brown said, you know, Snoopy, one day we'll all die. And Snoopy said, yeah, but every day until then, we get to live. And so if that's our orientation to life, that can get us pretty far.
Yeah, I think I basically agree. I mean, I think it is an orientation. Now, I think the tricky things about attitudes are, in part, is you can't always simply choose them, right? It does depend a little bit on what happens to you. And so they're responsive to conditions, and they may also involve choice. I think it would be odd to argue that gratitude is simply a choice, since it's supposed to be the acknowledgement of getting something from somewhere else. So I think we might want to say, part of the point here is grace, in some respects, that persons are formed by experiences and relationships that they themselves didn't devise, and they become grateful. Now, there's choice involved too, but perhaps we don't want to overemphasize it.
Can you tweeze out gratitude from some type of faith-based existence?
That would be challenging, because I think that I'm sure that you can be thankful. I think that anyone can be thankful. But I think once you have faith that understands what was done for you prior to anything that you did, you have a deeper level of appreciation.
Yeah.
And I think that when struggles come, you're challenged not to look just at what's right in front of you, but what already happened long before.
I think on these things, faith kind of overlaps with general experience. I mean, one way you can be grateful. I mean, I was grateful the day that I went in to see my father's dead body, and I'll tell you why. Right. It's because I realized I lucked out having this guy for a father. He's a terrific man. He's a short little Brazilian guy who took care of his sons and took care of his children and took care of his family and formed us in a whole bunch of different ways. I didn't do that. That showed up for me. Now, that can be enhanced maybe by a faith orientation, but it's not clear to me that you have to be Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or anything to understand that you owe somebody something. And just think when your father or your mother. So I think that it is faith, but faith overlaps a lot with general experiences in some ways.
Wow.
I would agree. I think gratitude can wash over you. Yeah. And sometimes we don't learn about gratitude till we're much older. And I was fortunate to be in a career in a nonprofit where I was working with women who were homeless. And as I would drive home from work each day in my 20s, I felt gratitude for so many things. The fact that I was driving home to my home, that I was going to be able to make a meal, that I was loved, that I had resources in my life and a network of support, that I became keenly aware I could take for granted, but was so glad that I was realizing that I didn't take for granted. And I think that's part of it, is that you realize that these are gifts and you can be grateful for them, and it actually creates more gratitude in others as they begin to experience that almost contagiously.
Something else I would add too is I tell folks in my counseling practice that once you experience, you're able to look at something that's positive, you're able to see something that you can be thankful for, it brings about hope.
Right.
That gratitude really is a hope generator.
John, doesn't gratitude, Doug, I was touched by what you were talking about with your father, and doesn't it bring about a vulnerability in people that we're, maybe, and I know we all work in a corporate environment or have worked in a corporate environment, and it can be seen as a weakness, can be seen as vulnerability, can be seen as accessibility. I mean, I know these are really softer sciences, but isn't that what gratitude is?
It absolutely is. It, as so many of you have already said, it incorporates acknowledging that we are grateful for more than we personally can achieve. And we don't find that in a lot of corporate cultures. When I worked at Bank of America, we worked a lot on culture and corporate organization and what drives, and we didn't probably make enough good use of gratitude, holding it up, along with teamwork, along with doing the right thing, along with diversity. And your point about vulnerability, I think, is an excellent one, and perhaps in all realms, both faith and corporate life and nonprofit life, we might be better if we made room for that vulnerability where we can recognize the humanity in each other. And that enhances our gratitude. It enhances our perspective. It allows us to count our blessings a little more broadly. And to your point about how demonstrating gratitude to a teammate, whether that teammate is someone you report to or somebody who reports to you or a lateral teammate, that enhances the workplace. It lifts spirits. And maybe we ought to make a little more room for that in corporate culture these days.
Why? Academic one. Why? Let me ask you this, Doug. I know you want to
that's right.
I don't want to lose this. Why are we afraid to show vulnerability to one another?
Well, let me try a Martin Luther quote on you when he's doing a sermon on the Apostles' Creed and on God the Creator. At a certain point he says, "Let us not think we've created ourselves as the proud princes do." Now, he has proud princes. We don't have as many princes. We do have captains of industry. We do have CEOs. We do have politicians. We do have a kind of an American idea that you should do it yourself and that you should be the one who's accomplished it all. We have American ideas of, quote, self-made persons. Right. Now, Luther is telling you there are no self-made persons. And so there's something that cuts against the grain a little bit of some aspects of American culture here. In order to be grateful, you need to acknowledge, I think everyone has said it here, that you received gifts from somewhere else that you yourself did not concoct or devise. Okay, that means you depend a little bit on some other people and some other conditions, and that sometimes is a tough thing for people to admit. I don't think it ought to be, but it is. Right?
So this sounds a lot like humility, and a lot of people will look at humility like a cow looks at a new gate. Right. I mean, they don't get it.
Right.
Is it being humble? Is it?
I think it's an interconnectedness and an interdependence.
You do?
I do.
Yes.
That is a good thing. We are, better together. I mean, I think just sitting together in the room waiting to be on the show, we all found points of connection with one another when we were talking. And that's a beautiful thing. We're much more alike than we are different. And so there's gratitude for that.
And the expression of gratitude is a lot like vulnerability in that we shelter ourselves, we want to hide back, we want to sit back and not be vulnerable. But really, if we only understood that what people want from us is vulnerability. Vulnerability brings about freedom. And when we are vulnerable, we're able to express our appreciation to other people.
But when you're vulnerable, it's not always taken well. I'm sure we could all recount some circumstance where that happened. I mean, when you're vulnerable to somebody, it's uncomfortable, they don't like it, they'll change the subject, or you won't get a call back on a certain thing. So, I mean, how do you square that?
Or maybe they're just afraid, they don't know how to respond in the moment, but truly they are thankful. I would just say, in counseling, every single day I'm spending time teaching people how to be vulnerable, and that the person who is the closest to them is so appreciative of that. That they want you to take that veil off. They want you to cut that curtain so that you really see who they are. And I think, I love in the idea that in the corporate world, managers, if they show some level of appreciation, they're really saying, hey, I am exposing something that I wouldn't normally expose to you that says, I see you, I know who you are, I appreciate you. That changes us.
So does that go to something? Go ahead, Doug, I interrupted you again.
I grew up outside of New York, and a bunch of people had moved there for big corporate jobs. There's a man who lived down the street from me, Mr. Russell, is a terrific guy. If you had asked him point blank how he got to where he was, he would have told you that he'd done it himself. But if you talked to him in more detail, he would have told you that he had a mother who was supportive and terrific, that he had a community that helped him grow up, that he had some people who were mentors when he came along the way in corporate industry and all those sorts of things. I think what he meant by saying he was a self-made man was he wasn't born on third base and thought that he hit a triple. He really did have to work for a lot that he got. And on the other hand, it didn't mean that he wasn't supported by a number of other things and he wasn't grateful for them. So I think sometimes don't take the next person you're talking to completely at his or her word when they start saying they're a self-made so-and-so. They might not really mean that if you probe it a little further.
So how do you be vulnerable as a CEO? How do you show that you're vulnerable and, oh, wait a minute, I'm not just vulnerable, but you might actually discover me, and I know one of the biggest fears we all have is being found out. So how do you let yourself be found out in your position, Kirsten?
Well, I think as a leader of an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a faith community or a for-profit industry, you have an opportunity to develop leadership in other people. And one of the ways you can do that is by sharing mistakes you've made, or by exposing some of your vulnerabilities, or by sharing what you're learning from them. I think in turn it allows that person or those people to be able to do the same for others. And I think they're grateful for knowing that you are human and that you're still a learning human being, not that you've got it all nailed. So I think it was fairly natural for me, in part because so early in my career I think I got grounded in that. And it's just a way of life. And so far I think it works fairly well because people respond to it. They want to be appreciated. And they turn around. It's kind of like smiling at someone, and that's a simple thing. But you can smile at someone in a grocery store, and you have no idea what that's going to do for them. We'll have women who live with us who are overcoming homelessness say, you have no idea, just a kind word sometimes makes a day so much better.
John, you look like you wanted to say something.
Well, it just triggers a thought. Just the other day, one of my church members told me about a new job she's taken, and this is a lady who's capable and of doing whatever she really wants. And I said, well, tell me about that. And she said, I'm a cashier at the Harris Teeter. And every day that equips me to I don't have to take my work home, but I can brighten somebody's day. I get that brief moment of interaction with all the customers that come through. And it's just like, as you were saying, Kristen, I can make a difference to that one person in that one moment. Now, that's not to say gratitude doesn't need to be rooted in much deeper and bigger things, but it is infectious, and it's a gift we can give each other.
You know, Rebecca, I look at you and I think about you for some family and personal loss that you've had, and not to put you on the spot, and others that you speak to that have had catastrophic loss. And I think, what is the relationship between gratitude and suffering?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that a lot of times you don't really learn gratitude until you've walked through suffering. And I think that when you are in sometimes the deepest waters, you're grasping for something. And I just say, you know, for myself, my husband and I experienced the loss of 2 stillborn sons back-to-back years. And what looked to be a very redemptive story turned out to be a really hard story. And I mean, it was very public, working in a church. I mean, everyone's aware that you're pregnant, and then all of a sudden you're not, and then you kind of walk through the same thing. And what I would say is that I had to, in those moments when I was in those deepest waters, I had to recognize that there was still something happening, that there was still something that I could be thankful for, that there was still the hope of tomorrow. There was still, you know, whether this story turned out the way that I wanted it to or not, that there was still something that was working that I would at some point be able to look back on and say, I really understand it now. That makes sense to me. But day after day, as I woke up, I would say, okay, well, today I'm thankful that I have 3 other healthy children. Today I'm thankful that I have a community who's loving us and supporting us. And it's really powerful to be able, when you're swimming in those deep waters, to be able to look and say, gosh, everything else on the surface really is sour. But and I am depleted personally, but I can find things. I can choose to look for some good.
So, Doug, what are we missing when we're trying to build this bridge? As Rebecca just talked about, this bridge between suffering and gratitude, because they seem counterintuitive.
I think what she says is really quite right. I mean, I think one thing that's true is that when people suffer, they're cut off from goals, they're cut off from valued matters, they're cut off from things that really make a difference to them, and they can't pursue them. They're cut off. On the other hand, very often, I don't know if it's true all the time, I don't want to speak for the entire planet right now, but very often there are other relationships, there are other conditions on which they depend that remain in place and that remain valuable and remain good. So part of the choice business, I think, is to look around a little bit and not get caught up in the idea that your whole life is involved in simply one single thing that's been cut off. So part of its plurality. There's a lot that goes into a lifetime. I'm sure anyone here could talk our ears off about how many different sorts of ways different things have happened to them, good and bad. So when you get in a circumstance, it's helpful if you can take maybe a big picture and realize there's a lot of other things going on. Now, I don't know if that'll always work. I don't really want to promise that anything will always work, but it seems to me that very often that's an important thing to do.
Well, you use the word bridge. How do we bridge from suffering to gratitude? And forgive my bias, but I think that's part of the business of religion. But it can be realized through spirituality in many other ways. Is can we see beyond ourselves, and can we trust and hope in something that is beyond ourselves, that will get us through there? Because it's at those moments when we can't see our way out of the darkness that we better have that capacity to put our trust and faith in something else. And the Scripture tells us that faith is the substance of things unseen. And whatever form that takes and whatever religion or spirituality one practices, that's everything to get us from that suffering to gratitude.
And I know I'm not telling you anything, John, but you are where the rubber meets the road with not just some of your parishioners, but friends. You are down in it with them when they've experienced huge loss. And how do you even broach the issue of gratitude when their heart's been cut out? How do you do that?
Slowly, carefully. At that, especially if there's acute moments of suffering, you do a whole lot more listening than talking. You be present. And you mediate that grace and you mediate that hope simply by being present. And don't overspeak and don't throw out glib cliches. Hopefully the work you've done with that person before and the work that you know will come afterward leads that person to a point of celebration. And so in our tradition, funerals are memorial services. They're celebrations of the life. Because I believe that at the end of the day, that leads us to closure and it leads us to healing. So whatever the loss might be, if we can celebrate what we had, that without making too small, too little of the loss and the hole that it leaves in our lives, yet if we can celebrate that life and give gratitude to whomever we give gratitude to, whatever divinity, whatever source, that puts us on the path to healing.
Yeah, Rebecca, I know you've got 1,000 stories around the same question to you. How do you bring that into a conversation for someone who just they can't even see out of the cloud of hurt?
You know, I was just thinking about how Scripture tells us that we are to rejoice in our sufferings. Now, what a crazy thought that is. Right. Rejoice in your sufferings, because suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces hope, and hope will not disappoint us. And
you can say that for sure every time.
Scripture says it. I believe it's true. And one of the things I would say is that when we're in the points of real suffering, when we're in the points where we do not believe it, I tell people, you know, all the time in ministry and counseling, hey, you've got to go with what you know to be true, not what you necessarily feel. We're going to feel a whole lot of things, but we know that certain things are true. We know that, you know, that God is good. We know that God is for us. We know that we have certain things to be thankful for, whether we feel it or not.
So, Kirsten, we've got a couple minutes left, and believe it or not, it goes that quickly, and just scratch the surface. But in an organization like you're the CEO of Young Women's Christian Association of Central Carolinas, it would lend itself to have a faith element in it. But in general, in corporate Carolina, are we missing the fact of are we missing things like gratitude because we have this such as clinical strength about separation between church and state? I'm not saying that you need to be overt about your religion, but are we missing something by not have gratitude in our organization?
I think any organization that misses having gratitude as part of its culture is leaving a lot of wonderful on the table. I think any home that doesn't have gratitude in it, the relationships are not as strong and thriving as they could be. I mean, I look oftentimes at partners, married couples, other partners, and am saddened by sometimes the lack of gratitude for one another. And I think just the practice of gratitude with the people you love, with your children, with your partner, you know, with the people that you work with, just begets more and more healthy culture, kindness to one another, care for one another when the chips are down. So I do believe that regardless of whether an organization is faith-based or not, you know, the social justice message, which is found in Scripture and in a lot of other traditions, is powerful, and it is a lot about caring for one another. And
we're out of time.
Oh,
but
I'm
I'm
sorry.
grateful that you did this.
Thank you.
You all, thank you.
Thank you.
Genuinely, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Happy holidays. Good job.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.